Hello Year 11, welcome to revision week 13. This week we're looking at network security and particularly threats to network security. Can you make sure you've got sheet 10 in front of you? Please ready. We're going to complete most of this sheet today, so make sure you are ready to make notes as we go along. Okay, so we are looking at threats to a network, things that can cause a network problems, okay? And there are the main threats you can see on the screen there: malware, brute force, denial of service, data interception, social engineering, and SQL injection. Those are all the threats that you need to be aware of for paper 1 in the exam. Okay, let's start by looking at malware, or malicious software, as it's short for, okay? Software installed on someone's device or computer without their knowledge or their consent, without them knowing about it or without them agreeing to it. Software installed on someone's device without their knowledge or consent. There are 3 types of malware that we covered. Viruses. Viruses attach themselves to files and they're activated when someone opens those files, like someone downloading a file and then running it. And it's spread by people downloading files or copying them that have been infected. And they're often designed to delete or modify or do annoying things on the computer. Worms are different because worms are self-replicating. They make copies of themselves without the user doing anything, so they can spread very quickly. And they exploit weaknesses in security, so they get into computers and then spread and multiply and things. And Trojans are programs that are disguised as legitimate real pieces of software. It might pretend to be an antivirus program or a game update or something like that, something free. They don't replicate themselves, but they have a hidden purpose, such as copying information and sending it back to a hacker, for example. So viruses, worms, and Trojans. So on your sheet now, if you haven't already, what is malware, the definition, and what are the 3 main points of viruses, Trojans, and worms? What are the main differences? Do this, pause the video now, and then check your answers in a moment. Okay, hopefully you've had time to write your answers down. Let's check. So, viruses, type of malware, attaches itself to certain files, spread by the user copying infected files and opening them. Trojans, type of malware that disguises itself as legitimate real software, but it has a hidden purpose. And worms, type of malware that self-replicates. It makes copies of itself without any user help. They spread very quickly. Check your answers, please, before moving on. Okay, as well as malware, malicious software, there are other different types of threats that you need to know about. One of those is passive attack. Now, if something's passive, it means it's quiet, it's not violent or loud. It's where someone monitors the data being sent on the network, so they're monitoring it, and they intercept any information, sensitive information they find. Things like passwords, bank accounts. As it's transferring, they intercept it. Now, passive, because it's quiet, it's hard to detect. There's no obvious signs of someone doing it quite often. They're just watching the data going backwards and forwards so it can be captured. The best way to protect against passive attack, of course, is encryption, which we will look at later on, which makes it hard to read and to understand. Passive. The opposite of passive is active, where someone is actively attacking a network using malware, malicious software. They might be using things like viruses or other things to try and attack or get into a network actively. It's much easier to detect because there are normally signs to spot, such as the network slowing down or things accessing stuff they shouldn't do. The best defense against an active attack is a firewall because it helps to stop malware getting into the network, stop hackers getting in or preventing access. Active attack. Attacking a network using malware. Very different. An insider attack is the third one we're looking at. This is when someone within the organization exploits their access. For example, if a teacher in a school misuse their access to gain information about the school or students and things like that, okay? When someone within the organization exploits their network access to steal information or cause damage. Why do it? They might do it for financial reasons, they might do it for revenge for a company, or a challenge to see what they can access. And the best defense against that is having separate user accounts and different privileges. Just like in school, we have student accounts and teacher accounts and then admin accounts for higher different levels of access. And the final one we're looking at the moment is brute force attack. This is where someone is trying to crack a passwords using trial and error by trying lots of different combinations of passwords until they find the correct one. Obviously, the harder the password is, the harder it is to crack, and the more combinations they have to try. So using strong passwords helps to prevent this, and also locking an account after a certain number of attempts. Maybe after 3 or 4 attempts, an account might be locked to prevent hackers getting in. Okay, brute force. Trying to gain access by cracking passwords through trial and error. And denial of service. Denial of service is where hackers try to stop other people accessing the network, denying service to things by flooding the network with useless data and traffic. So bombarding it with data so that other people that want to use it can't access it. To the point where sometimes the network may crash or a firewall may crash because it's being bombarded constantly. Makes the network slow, it can make it completely inaccessible, and it can even damage or crash hardware. The best defense is a strong, hard firewall that helps to stop that data getting in the first place. Okay, if you've made notes as you go along, that's fine. If not, check on your note sheet now, the section here, types of attacks. Checking the main points there for the different types of attacks. You've got passive, active, insider, brute force, and denial of service. Do that now, please. Okay, hopefully you've made notes on those main types of attacks. And the best ways to prevent, remember, passive is encryption, active would be a firewall, insider attack having user account levels, brute force having strong passwords, or denial of service having firewall. Just take a moment. If you can, I've got a highlighter as well, that'd be very helpful. Just add in the best ways to protect them onto your notes now, please. Okay, let's move on. So we've got last couple of sections to look at, then we finished our threats. Another threat that we looked at was social engineering, a way of gaining sensitive information or illegal access by influencing people, by manipulating people, making people do things that they don't really want to do. Okay, there are two main types of social engineering that we looked at. There is over the phone using voice, which is vishing, and there is using email or website based social engineering, things like phishing, fake websites or fake email addresses. So social engineering is a way of gaining sensitive information or illegal access to a network by influencing people, by trying to make people do things that they shouldn't really. Over the phone, it could be someone calling up, pretending to be someone else, an employee or a network manager, and then doing things to try and gain someone's trust and getting them to give information or access to things that you shouldn't do. By giving maybe a sob story or giving some sort of scenario which is trying to convince the person to do something over the phone. The other way then is using emails or websites, fake emails or websites, which trick people into entering confidential information, such as a website's pretending to be someone's bank, and then they type in their details, and then the hacker would have that information. Or clicking on a link that they don't realize takes them to a fake website, for example, from an email. So using fake emails or websites to get people to enter information, confidential information. And the one final one linked to websites, this is the one where hackers put code into an input box on a website. They inject SQL code into the input box of a website to try and basically bypass the security. They input the code into a box, and when the button is clicked, it then tries to bypass the login by doing things to the database, by using SQL code to access or carry out commands on the database that the website is linked to. Okay. Obviously, you can prevent against that by doing checks on the box. But if it's not designed well, an SQL injection attack could help to bypass and get past a firewall, for example, on a website. And to prevent against it, you have strong input validation checks to check what is being entered into a box to get rid of any bad or dangerous words or code that might be used. Strong input validation checks. Okay, final section for today's video. Describe these different types of attacks. What was social engineering? What was SQL injection? Do that now, please. Okay, checking your answers. Here we go. Social engineering, a way of gaining sensitive information by influencing people. Phishing is using your voice to influence people. And phishing is using emails or text or websites to trick people into giving confidential information. And SQL injection is where pieces of SQL code are typed into a website's input box, the box where you type in information, and it's to try to reveal or gain access to information in the database. Best defense? Strong validation checks to check the data being input. Checking your answers, please, before moving on to the final part. Okay, we've just covered all the threats that you need to know about to a network, all the things that could go wrong. I'd now like you to do revision quiz 13 on Learn Cume. As always, check each answer, try another question like that one again to retempt this question if you get it wrong. You should be getting 100% by the end of the quiz. Do this now, please, ready for checking in lesson. See you in lesson. Goodbye.